make with
And I
it.
think
Exactly.
the most effective way to tackle healthcare for this many people would be a model blend where we have government resources and agency, but we still have some of our existing structures, so we don't have to flip over the monopoly board, and start from scratch. Because
Yeah.
that's going to create a lot of, structural disruption. And I don't want to underestimate how bad it could get when you have, a third of the country unemployed. I mean, what's going to happen? It's just, you know what
Well,
I mean?
exactly.
So
In theory, the idea would be, you can keep your health plans, but we're still going to be able to provide those people that don't have health care
we
a
want everyone to
plan.
have access to
Exactly.
it. I just want us to work together on it because I don't think that only the government can handle it. I've been
And
to
I
the
feel like
DMV.
also giving people the choice without raising their premiums, right? So if you have your own healthcare system, you don't have to, necessarily pay more because you have a private healthcare. Like with Obamacare, a lot of people
How
didn't like it because their premiums went up.
interesting, really. I know that.
Yeah.
How would you feel about a Canada model where it's like the government will pay for, if you come into the hospital and you have the flu or pneumonia or something, they're going to treat you. But if you need a prescription for Lexapro or something, they're not going to cover the cost. But they will negotiate the prices with drug companies to try to keep the cost low. Would that be a model that you guys would be interested in, or like not really? Because there are a lot of
Eric?
Americans that are on prescription drugs as well. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I could see that working. But also, like, I feel like that's almost a step. It feels like where they draw the line there just
I
seems
see.
odd to me. I don't
Okay.
know. I'm not exactly sure which direction it really should be leaning towards. It just seems like an odd point to draw
That's
the line,
interesting.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
No.
I feel like it should be either if you're gonna do this type of system, it's you get more coverage than that or less, like one of the two. It's like just kind of in the middle, being yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like, so having the government, I'm going to repeat this actually. So having the government negotiate the prices to the pharmacies. So that's in the way
To the
how they
drug,
control
yeah,
it.
in Canada, this is something they, unlike the United States, in Canada, the federal government will negotiate with the manufacturer of drugs like OxyContin or penicillin or ibuprofen or Tylenol.
Is
Or
that based off of the production cost?
I don't know how they do it, but I know that basically, I think of it sort of like a rent control in a way, in the sense that they're saying you can't charge more. They're
This
putting a
like insulin
ceiling.
can't be
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
$1,000
They're
because
like,
people need this insulin basically.
yes. So they basically, the company, I'm sure, figures out how much money they need to make to be profitable and to pay their employees and make the drug or whatever and everything, and then they negotiate with the government and settle on a price. But there's more proactivity on behalf of the citizens, but they also do have this weird thing where it's like you can go see the doctor, but we might not like cover your prescription for an antibiotic. So they draw, so it's like,
It's like
but
that.
no one ever,
It's like
no one
a,
ever. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say though, this sounds like, when I was in school, necessarily my insurance would pay for like some like it. No, just kidding. I'm stepping that back. Keep talking. That's
Okay.
not.
Well, I just think it's interesting how no one ever tells you like the second or third sentence. They just start off with Canada has like universal coverage. It's like they do, but
But
but a lot of people fly here for surgeries because they can't wait for their osteoporosis to get that bad. A lot of people, you have to pay for your own prescriptions. They don't pay for eyeglasses or dental either in Canada. So it's like it is universal coverage, but sort of. They won't pay if you have a cavity. If you have a toothache, cavity, that's on you. But you can go get a Band-Aid or some alcohol if you get a cut or whatever. You know what I mean? So
So
I get what you're saying.
it's not as simple as just it's universal, everything is top quality and free. It's like you're misleading people.
yeah, so
That's not really
it's
how it is.
basically you can go see the doctor, but anything that the doctor can do to actually help you, you have to pay for.
Bingo.
Okay.
So
So,
why
Yeah,
aren't they portraying
that's-
this, right?
yeah,
They're
that's-
so
just saying
I want to
universal
pop that
healthcare.
bubble of Canada being the holy grail of models. I want to pop that bubble because our model is diseased, but that model, it's very
It's like a
interesting.
pro and con. It's which one do you want better?
Well, it's just
you
that
know?
I just don't think that I think it's sort of held on a pedestal. That's all, and it's like
Yeah.
it's really not what you like. There's a lot more to
That
the picture
goes
than
into
meets the eye. You know what I mean? So it's not as simple as just, oh, everyone in Canada gets healthcare all the time.
All right. So next point, what do you think about?
What his campaign said, because we should pave the way for him to become the nominee. I have been told as a woman, as someone that maybe no one thought was still going to be standing up on this stage, but I am because of pure grit and because of the people out there. I've been told many times to wait my turn and to step aside. And I'm not going to do that now. And I'm not going to do that because a campaign memo from Mayor Bloomberg said this morning that the only way that we get a nominee is if we step aside for him. I think we need something different than Donald Trump. I don't think you look at Donald Trump and say, we need someone richer in the White House.
Thank you. Mayor Bloomberg, there's a lot for you to respond to there, so here's your opportunity.
I think we have two questions to face tonight. One is, who can beat Donald Trump? And number two, who can do the job if they get into the White House? And I would argue that I am the candidate that can do exactly both of those things. I'm a New Yorker. I know how to take on an arrogant con man like Donald Trump that comes from New York. I'm a mayor, or was a mayor. I know how to run a complicated city, the biggest, most diverse city in this country.
Okay, we can call it.
I'm a manager. I knew.
Mikey, go.
I think my first impression is that Amy Klobuchar looks nervous as hell up there, and that she is like, her brain is racing a million miles a second. So that's my first. I think that some points she made. I don't think that, she really made any good points. She was just trying to defend herself. That's with her points. There you go.
Okay, I got 60 seconds here. So yeah, I think that she seemed very defensive. I think that she seemed, although one part of me thinks that she seemed like she was, showing, her true mettle and her true grit. At the same time, I was sort of thinking, it's interesting how you feel like how you have to provide all of the examples that prove that, you have mettle. Just say it and I'll believe you. You know what I mean? So I think that, maybe she's just a little stressed out in the situation, but this definitely gets more stressful for her. So I just think at this point she looks okay, but we'll see later.
In terms of who can beat Donald Trump, NBC did a poll yesterday. It says Joe Biden is best equipped to beat Donald Trump. That's what your poll said. And it said that I can beat him in those toss-up states, too, those states we have to win. I'm ahead by 8 points across the board. So in terms of being able to beat Donald Trump, I'm better positioned, according to your poll, than anybody else to beat Donald Trump. Number one. Number two, the mayor makes an interesting point. The mayor says that he has a great record, that he's done these wonderful things. Well, the fact of the matter is he has not managed his city very, very well when he was there. He didn't get a whole lot done. He had stop and frisk, throwing close to 5 million young black.
So, first thoughts, Riley?
I think it's just so funny to watch Joe Biden try to come alive and put a sentence together. So part of me is just laughing a little bit because it reminds me of the Joe Biden with the whole, in the swimming pool, they used to rub the legs on my, or the hair on my legs and it'd stand up straight and, swimming pool. And I love kids in my lap. So it's just funny to hear Joe Biden, but he makes a good point. He's still leading in national polls, although in his, against him, Bloomberg did, just surpass him in national polls, which is why he qualified for this debate, because he's not on the ballot for Nevada or South Carolina.
Yeah, I think kind of touching on some points you made, I think that national polls wise, he may be leading, according to him, but if you look at the last couple of primaries, he has not done well. So I think that he kind of needs to form a better strategy to be able to get voters, as the primary goes on.
And we're rolling.
Yes, we've got to wake up as a party. We could wake up 2 weeks from today, the day after Super Tuesday, and the only candidates left standing will be Bernie Sanders and Mike Bloomberg, the two most polarizing figures on this stage. And most Americans don't see where they fit if they've got to choose between a socialist who thinks that capitalism is the root of all evil and a billionaire who thinks that money ought to be the root of all power. Let's put forward somebody who actually lives and works in a middle-class neighborhood in an industrial Midwestern city. Let's put forward somebody who's actually a Democrat. Look.
That's a good spot.
First thoughts, Riley?
Oh, me again? Okay. I think that Pete hit the nail on the head. I think that this was the start of his rise over the course of the debate because he's making an honest point. You have one person who literally honeymooned in the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union, singing, "This land is your land, this land is my land," and someone who makes even more vulgar remarks, or at least equally vulgar remarks, as Donald Trump. And he's just wealthy and pays people off, and later you'll see the NDA. So I think Pete right now is looking like the guy to bet on.
Candidate.
Yes.
Okay. I like his point of, he is a middle class, working guy, right? He, can relate to the middle class, I think, a little bit more than Bernie can, and definitely more than freaking Michael Bloomberg can, because, look at Bernie Sanders, he has these socialist issues, but, he's flying on his private jets to get to these debates. And then you have Bloomberg, who, says he's a Democrat, right? But he used the capitalistic model to be able to grow his company. So, you have to at least believe to grow his company. He believed in capitalism, at least when he was doing it.
We have over 10.6 million people on Twitter, and 99.9% of them are decent human beings, are working people, are people who believe in justice, compassion, and love. And if there are a few people who make ugly remarks, who attack trade union leaders, I disown those people. They are not part of our movement. But let me also say, what I hope my friends up here will agree with, is that if you look at the Wild West of the internet, talk to some of the African American women on my campaign, talk to Senator Nina Turner, talk to others, and find the vicious, racist, sexist attacks that are coming their way as well. So I would hope that all of us understand that we should do everything we possibly can to end the viciousness and ugliness on the internet. Our campaign is about issues. It's about fighting for the working families and the middle class. It is not about vicious attacks on other people.
Senator, when you say that you disown these attacks and you didn't personally direct them, I believe you.
Well, thank you.
But at a certain point, you got to ask yourself, why did this pattern arise? Why is it especially the case among your supporters?
I don't think it is especially the case, by the way.
That's just not true. Look,
well,
people know.
Pete, if you want to talk to some of the women on my campaign, what you will see is the most ugly, sexist, racist attacks that are, I won't even describe them here. They're so disgusting. And let me say something else about this.
Okay, we can start. Mikey, go.
I think that Buttigieg makes a very good point in the sense that, he is portraying himself as being all inclusive, but, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters are not necessarily being nonviolent. I think that Sanders voters are kind of like Trump's voters, where they attack people that don't agree with his point of views.
Yeah, well, I think what's really interesting is, so you look at the city of Portland, where the mayor is also the police chief, and there was a soft conservative homosexual Asian journalist, a male named Andy Ngo, and he was covering a Proud Boys Antifa event, where Proud Boys on the right, Antifa on the left, and they were fighting it out in Portland, and he was beat nearly to death in front of a police officer that was told to stand down by the mayor, and the mainstream media didn't cover it. He was beat so bad that he has permanent brain damage. People from Antifa started throwing milkshakes and food at him and stomping him on the ground just because they knew he was a conservative journalist, not realizing he's, there's more to the picture in the sense that, he meets some other demographics, but that shouldn't matter. They nearly beat a journalist to death. So there are people that are out there saying we need a revolution, and they're violent, and those people join groups like Antifa.
We need to get everybody's health care plan out here. Mayor Buttigieg really has a slogan that was thought up by his consultants to paper over a thin version of a plan that would leave millions of people unable to afford their health care. It's not a plan, it's a PowerPoint. And Amy's plan is even less. It's like a Post-it note, insert plan here. Bernie.
All right.
has started very much, has a good start, but instead of expanding and bringing in more people to help, instead his campaign relentlessly attacks everyone who asks a question or tries to fill in details about how to actually make this work. And then his own advisors say, probably won't happen anyway. Look, healthcare is a crisis in this country.
Mikey, go, 60 seconds.
I think it's kind of ironic that she attacks Amy, Buttigieg, and Bernie towards their healthcare systems, in the sense that, you know, so with Buttigieg, she states that he is only kind of glossing over what we already have, where Klobuchar doesn't even have a plan, is basically what she's saying. And then Bernie, you know, I'll take some of your ideas that I like, but, you know, I'm going to add on it because, you know, you're not going to. That's my opinion. I feel like that's kind of what I saw there.
Okay, interesting. I think this might have been Elizabeth Warren's most strong point in the entire thing, in the sense that she was fierce, she made good points, and she did it in a pretty good amount of time. So I think in just about, I mean, she did 1 minute for one fell swoop to get 3 different people, but she has a good point about Buttigieg's plan. It's not too comprehensive. She has a good point about Amy's plan. By the way, Amy also couldn't name the president of Mexico, so it seems like she has a lot of gaps in knowledge. So, you know, just generally. And then I think attacking Bernie actually isn't fair, because for a while she adopted his plan and was like Medicare for all, but then she saw that it wasn't very popular, so she backed off of it and started calling herself a capitalist. And it was like, oh, so I don't, you know, I think it's a little disingenuous, but I do think she made some good points, especially against Klobuchar.
I'm the only one on this stage that's actually got anything done on health care. Okay? I'm the guy the president turned to and said, go get the votes for Obamacare. And I noticed what everybody's talking about is the plan that I first introduced. That is to go and add to Obamacare, provide a public option, a Medicare-like option. It cost and increase the subsidies. It cost a lot of money. It cost $750 billion over 10 years. But I pay for it by making sure that Mike and other people pay at the same tax rate their secretary pays at. That's how we get it paid, number one. Number two, you know, from the moment we passed that signature legislation, Mike called it a disgrace, number one. Number two, Trump decided to get rid of it. And number three, my friends here came up with another plan. But they don't tell you. When you ask Bernie how much it cost, the last time he said that, I think it was on your show, he said, we'll find out. We'll find out how, or something to that effect.
Okay, Michael, 60 seconds.
No, you
Joe
go
Biden.
first.
Oh God, I think this is Joe Biden's best moment. I mean, I don't think it's totally fair for him to like staple himself to Obamacare, and then that's, you know, in the sense that like it was him and Obama and Congress. It wasn't like just he carried the bill on his back and then notarized it, you know what I mean? But I do think it's a strong point to make, because he's right. Everyone on that stage has a plan, honestly, that is, you know, really, you know, not good. And the only thing that has worked as far as extending coverage is the ACA, and that's all Biden. So the mummy himself came alive for this one, and he crawled out of that tomb and he said, I'm the only one that's gotten anything done. So I think that's his best moment all night.
Fair enough. I will say the only critique like I would give him is, you know,
did you order a TV?
This is an excellent time, so I don't know if we're going to get rid of this segment or not, but we will find out whether or not the Chronicles of Michael continue with the addition of a TV.
So I actually took a look at the plans that are posted. Mayor Buttigieg, there are 4 expenses that families pay, right? Premiums, deductibles, copays, and uncovered medical expenses. Mayor Buttigieg says he will put a cap only on the premiums. And that means families are going to pick up the rest of the cost. Amy, I looked online at your plan. It's 2 paragraphs. Families are suffering and they need a plan. You can't simply stand here and trash an idea to give health care coverage to everyone without having a realistic plan of your own. And if you're not going to own up to the fact either that you don't have a plan or that your plan is going to leave people without health care coverage, full coverage, then you need to say so. I just want to say on this, when I was in Reno, when I met a man.
So the last line I think was maybe her strongest line yet, in the sense, I know I just said that, but in the sense that she basically is making the same point that Buttigieg has tried to make previously in this debate, which is do not promise people the moon because you cannot deliver them the moon, and then when the moon doesn't show up, they're going to get really, really upset and really frustrated, and then vote for another angry populist president who's going to say, oh, we're going to, get to it's rife with corruption and we're going to dig them all out. And so I think it's interesting how she points out that basically Amy, and that's true, look, it's another gap in her knowledge. I think that Amy Klobuchar is very prideful and doesn't want to admit the fact that honestly she's only here because a lot of other people that ran were just less appealing. Cory Booker didn't really turn out. Kamala Harris didn't really turn out. Tom Steyer didn't really turn out. Michael Bennet really didn't turn out. All of these candidates didn't turn out, so they all basically dropped out. Andrew Yang just dropped out. But so Klobuchar is just riding coattails. So I think that she thinks that she's been in the Washington arena and she understands the world knowledge, but she can't name the president of Mexico. She can't talk about any of their policies. I mean, she's winning in a predominantly white state as a white woman. It's not like she's really reaching across the aisle that much. So I think Elizabeth Warren really is on fire here.
We're going to stay on this topic, but I want to get something in here with Senator Klobuchar. When you were the top prosecutor in Minneapolis, Senator, there were at least 24 instances where police were involved in the deaths of civilians. None of those officers were prosecuted. You did prosecute a black teenager who was sentenced to life in prison, despite what are now serious doubts about the evidence. Now, the Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP has recently called for you to suspend your campaign over that case because some new evidence has come out since. Big picture, why should black and Latino voters trust your judgment now if it appears you may have gotten it wrong then?
First, I'll start with that case. It is very clear that any evidence, if there is new evidence, even old evidence, it should be reviewed by that office and by the county attorney. That must happen. I have called for that.
Mike, go.
I think that you could kind of see in her reaction, this question really made her nervous. I mean, she gulped. I think that the speaker makes a very good point in saying, you have two cases where, citizens have been killed by police and then weren't prosecuted, and then you threw an African American into jail, right?
Well, on evidence that now may have been proven to be faulty. And I believe that they said, I don't know if it was 2 or 24 instances, but there were some instances where basically, it sounds sort of like your typical profiling maybe situation, and police got off scot-free, and people remember things like Rodney King in this country where there have been injustices along racial lines between cops and civilians, where civilians get injured or hurt or killed, and the police officers get off scot-free. And I think that this answer, we just give it to a grand jury, is really just her saying, I don't have an answer, so take that. But I think that this is the point in the debate where she really started to crumble. I think that she gets increasingly nervous, increasingly anxious. You can tell.
I disagree. I feel like she's been nervous this whole debate. From the start to finish. I feel like she kind of fumbled over a word. You touched on Mexico before. She really didn't go in there with a plan and an objective. She kind of just went in there, and I think that it shows.
I'm actually less concerned about the lack of transparency on Sanders' personal health than I am about the lack of transparency on how to pay for his health care plan, since he said that it's impossible to even know how much it's going to cost. And even after raising taxes on everybody making $29,000, there is still a multi-trillion-dollar hole. Matter of fact, if you add up his policies altogether, they come to $50 trillion. He's only explained $25 trillion worth of revenue, which means that the hole in there is bigger than the size of the entire economy of the United States. The time has come to level with the American people on matters personal and on matters of policy.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, quickly.
Mike, go.
So I think that Pete Buttigieg hits it on the nail. Bernie Sanders has this plan without really showing how he's going to execute the plan. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but his plan is doubling our economy, or it's assuming that our economy is going to be double of what it already is. So where is this money going to come from? Are you going to tax, the middle class? And on top of that, $29,000, if you make more than that, the rate you pay for healthcare is going to go up. People do not like to hear that, period.
That's a good point. I think that taxes in that way, like I've said before, can be good, but they can also be regressive. In Paris, France, if they put a tax on certain energy, then poor people can't keep their houses warm in the wintertime. So the Yellow Vest movement happened. But I think what's even better is that, again, Bernie Sanders has had years and years and years and years and years, decades, to explain a comprehensive health care plan and determine where the money can actually come from. But you never hear him talk about the actual tax rate. You never hear him actually talk about which corporations and how much they'll pay. You just see him raise his hand. And the fact is, on a Fox News town hall, a CBS town hall, and an NBC interview before this debate, he came up empty trying to explain how much it's going to cost and where the money is going to come from. So I think Pete came in like a hawk and hit the nail right on the head. Let's do a final thoughts.
My final thoughts. I think the first half of the debate was very interesting. I think that each candidate kind of went after each other in different ways. I think that Elizabeth Warren made very good points to Amy, Pete, and Bernie in attacking their healthcare plan. I think that the Bernie and Bloomberg were both attacked in the way that that Buttigieg and Amy and Warren all kind of stated that they're kind of dividing the Democratic Party. I think there was a lot of good points that were made in the first half of the primaries.
Eric.
I think I agree that there are a lot of good points made. I think Warren had a very strong showing. Pete also is up there. I think those two were the top of this so far in this debate. Klobuchar, I get what you guys are saying about her. For me, I'm not seeing it 100%. Yes, she was flustered and everything, but I don't think she was as bad as you guys are saying or making it out to be. But that's just from my lens. And Biden was he was all right. He had a couple good points here and there, mainly on the Obama healthcare. But like you said, he's just kind of attaching himself again to Obama, and that's his claim to fame. So, and yeah, Bloomberg shouldn't have been there.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. So the headline is Bloomberg gets there because he spends $300 million in 1 month on advertising. Elizabeth Warren had a very, very strong night. Pete Buttigieg had a slightly less strong night. Amy Klobuchar had a, sort of a mixed bag where there were some things that were very tough, but she struggled through. But there were other parts where she definitely did stick up for herself, and I think that's good. I think the clear winner, though, is Elizabeth Warren. I don't know if that's going to change the polls much, but what I want to end on is the fact that later, and we didn't get to this, but they had a question where they asked the candidates, so if the leader of the party doesn't have a majority, are you guys okay with giving that person the nomination? And 4 or 5 of 6 said no, right? Everyone but Bernie says no. So what I think is very interesting is, we're at a point where it's this is literally a repeat of 2016. Bernie Sanders he's the front runner, but 75% of his party didn't vote for him. You know what I mean? He only got 25%. So it's you're a front runner, but that doesn't mean you have a majority. So Donald Trump won 30%, 30%, 35%, 36%, and then one day he got it because there were 15 people that were less appealing. So, or for whatever reason, right? So I think that this is literally a duplicate of 2016, but for the Democratic Party. And Bernie Sanders is going to keep, we'll see how he does in Nevada and South Carolina and Tennessee. But I think he's, Florida, but he's going to get 27%. 28%, 30%, and everyone else is slowly just going to drop like flies until I think that he's probably going to be the nominee. That's still my bet. I think he's going to be the nominee, and then I actually don't know how that election is going to turn out because it's two very populisty people that wag their fingers a lot. Telling people, I'm upset about this and that. So I don't honestly know, but that's what I think.
Based off of that, then Trump's probably going to win the election just based off of the mindset of the American people and capitalism first. So the second you hear socialism, everybody shuts down. And if you have a socialist candidate or a democratic socialist candidate that's running, I don't know if that's gonna.
Well, again, he's had, in his defense, he's 78 years old. He's had 70 years to explain his socialist vision, and he hasn't. So I don't think people are not tolerant of that word. I think people just see through his theater. because honestly, he looks like he's literally winging it. He has said anytime he's under a light, like when you put a flashlight on a cockroach and you finally have it cornered, he sits there and he says, okay, I don't know how much it's going to cost. We'll figure it out. People don't like to hear that when they are in debt. They're trying to figure out how to afford to live already. So I think yes, but I also don't think it's about intolerance so much. I think it's just that he's had so many chances to explain himself and he's not done that. So people are just not really trusting. That's how I view it.
I disagree with you. I feel like those that aren't following politics a lot, they don't fucking care about, excuse my language, guys, but they don't care about what Bernie Sanders has done in the past. I think that they see, you know, an increase in taxes, and that scares the living crap out of them. With that simple point, you know, they don't want to lose their healthcare plan. They don't want to have to pay more so someone else can go to school when they've worked their whole lives to be able to provide for their kids so they could go to school and they focused on their living. I feel like that is what's going to turn a lot of people off of Bernie Sanders.
For me, it's other stuff too, where it's like you want to raise the minimum wage, but then raise the taxes on anyone, like everyone that's like middle class. It's like, yes, you've raised our wages, but then you've also increased our tax burden, right? So it's like there are a lot of things where it's like, oh yes, you know, we'll provide this, but it's going to cost this. So it's like, again, the cheese in the mousetrap is always free. But eventually you walk outside and realize that things don't just grow on trees or come out of thin air. You can't.
Because I will say this. When you look at Trump, I know that a lot of people who follow politics are very scared with what has happened within these last 3-4 years. You know, I think that it has been a lot of theater, or in the sense that's opinionized. You know, he has done a lot in the courts, and, you know, we could go on that debate another time. But I feel like a lot of people in this country feel like as Donald Trump being who he is in office hasn't really affected their lives. And I think that a lot of people are holding on to that.
I mean, I think what's happened is that people have become so sensitive and so tender. Like you just said, most people who follow politics. Elizabeth Warren went to Harvard, but so did Ben Shapiro. And they're on complete opposite sides of the aisle. So I actually know a lot of educated people that voted for Donald Trump, people with PhDs, people who are professors and engineers. So, like, I think it's that kind of thinking that gets the Democratic Party to where they are. They think there's no way a smart person could have possibly voted for that person. And then you turn everyone, you know, that kind of bigotry and that kind of mindset makes people want to go vote for him more. So I think when you sit there and say, oh, all you Trump supporters are ignorant and dumb and racist, people hear that shit and say, why are you assuming you know me and that I'm a racist or not? And it's like, you have like 30% of the Black Caucus voting for this president. You're going to sit there. I hear people literally on Twitter tell African Americans who voted for Trump they're racist. And it's like, you're going to tell them that they don't like black people when they're African American. Like, you're going to take that identity away from them because you don't agree with who, you know, how they voted.
You're going to feel like you have the right to even do that in the first place.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't condone all of this behavior, but it's also this sort of, that's a very us versus them mindset to have. Like, we don't know how most educated people feel about this stuff because we can't poll 300 million people. Like, people are complicated. I don't want to speak on behalf of the American public. I'm just saying that generally I think that Bernie, the criticism was fair in the sense that he's had 4+ decades to explain himself and he hasn't. So I don't think that people have a problem with the S word. I think that people have a problem with the fact that he doesn't have a platform.
Okay.
Look, he makes good points, but that's different from having a platform. A lot of them on stage make good points, but they don't have platforms. Klobuchar makes good points, but her healthcare is 2 paragraphs, right? Like, you know, I mean, yeah, she has an interesting platform, but most of it is riding the wave of we have to defeat Trump. And if people want to defeat Trump, they're going to have to start stepping out. 6 of you can't run for president at the same time. So I think what's interesting is going forward, I think we're going to get to a point where you're going to have Bernie Sanders topping out at 28% of the vote, but that's as far as it goes, first past the post. And the DNC might think, well, you know, he's the front runner, so that's it. And I think the only thing else that could maybe change their mind is if the economy slows, or, you know, Trump shoots himself in the foot in some other way, like with the Stone case. Like, you know, the 2 biggest things that could take him down are the economy and himself.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that these last 4 years have shown that, you know, he may shoot himself in the foot, but, you know, the Republican Party is still going to back him up as he shoots himself in the same spot again and again and again instead of just keeping his mouth shut.
Yeah, so I don't think he has a foot at this point. if we're using that analogy.
That's fair.
So-
Yeah.
So
Like either be. But I think what's interesting though, honestly, is just that like as these debates go on, we can start, and you look at the record versus what people say in debates, we're starting to figure out who's more sincere and who are people who are just trying to get elected.
Oh, the Washington Post just posted an article, or like yesterday, that said Bernie Sanders was informed that Russia is
Oh, I saw that.
helping his
NPR
campaign.
reported it this morning. Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting.
And
It
they
is-
also said that about Trump too.
Yeah, so
Ooh.
you notice how in 2016
Populism.
they picked him and now it's him. You notice how they intentionally pick people who are radical, or in the sense that they invoke a lot of appeal to emotion, sort of, and the sort of pick a scapegoat, blame them, and then, and it evokes people get angry. There's a reason why the Proud Boys and Antifa, they're literally out there with masks for a political cause, like beating on each other. And so it's like, we can't pretend that this doesn't get violent. And I just think that that's very interesting that basically the Kremlin or Putin is just trying to find anyone he can that he knows is going to get people at a dinner table upset.
Yeah.
If they're start talking about it. Like,
who's
he's
gonna
picking
cause
the
the
most
most
controversial figures in American politics to get behind. I just want to make that point. I think that's interesting.
So if that is the case, how much of Bernie Sanders followers, the negative connotation that Bernie Sanders followers have gotten, that was demonstrated in the debate, does that change your opinion on that at all? Because now it's being shown that maybe those followers aren't even actual followers, they're just bots bought by Russia.
Oh, yeah, so interesting. So, so the thing is, the followers have been pretty aggressive since like 2015. There was just a video leaked. Well, so like the Antifa thing. People literally beat a journalist, a homosexual, Vietnamese, conservative, or, right-leaning journalist nearly to death in front of a police officer in Portland. And the name of their group is Antifa, like anti-fascist, as they're beating innocent people nearly to death. So it's like, this has been going on a lot longer than that. I remember back in 2013 or 2012, there were people in Congress playing baseball recreationally, and someone came up and basically just shouted Bernie and then flipped him. Like, this pattern has been going on for a while, and Pete is really tapping into that. This pattern has been going on for a while. There is a certain, sort of Marxist class warfare, we must butt heads and overthrow everything kind of rhetoric to Senator Sanders. And people pick up on that, and they do things like make death threats on Twitter. I mean, maybe it's a bot, but it's been happening for years and years and years. So I wouldn't blame it on Russian bots. I mean, Russian bots are a part of it, but it's also like, it's no secret that, like Trump, he invokes a lot of emotion. He gets people stirred up. Most of his sentences are complaints, grievances. I'm upset about this. I'm upset about that. This isn't good enough. These things shouldn't exist. Like, most of his talking points are grievances, just like this current president. So I'm just saying that that's an interesting point, but it's been going on much, earlier. Like, the timeline's different. Like,
Totally understand
like,
that. Yeah, that was just my first thoughts after reading that article.
But I will
the
say this.
timing of everything. It's just
But I will say also, though, something I should say to really round this out is that there's still at least, probably 85, 90, 95% of people who support him are very peaceful. It really is a minority. I do want to make that point. They're loud.
Do you have radicalism
and
everything?
Sometimes you see threats and threatening language and doxing people where you try to put expose them online, their personal information. So, but still, I mean, most of his supporters are peaceful people. I don't want to act like only thugs or something. You know what I mean? Like, most of his supporters are very peaceful people. There are just maybe a few, like 3 to 4%, or maybe tops 5% of people who go a little too far. And there have been some viral videos dropped lately about language, and
you can say that about any ideology in the history of ideology. There's always going to be like that 5%. That's
so is that really
exactly.
Bernie's fault?
Well, so exactly. I don't want to beat up on Bernie, because that's not fair, because they're at least most by far of his supporters support him because they actually want what he wants. They like what he has to say. So that's fair. I just think that it's interesting that it's like there aren't Warren supporters out there making death threats, or Klobuchar supporters, or Yang supporters, or Cory Booker supporters.
Don't have supporters.
Some of them, yes.
All right, everyone. I will say that is concluding our podcast for the day. Thank you for coming in and viewing. If you like the video, hit that thumbs up button. Also hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate the followers. And if you have any comments or any questions, you can always shoot them in the comment section. Thank you again for viewing our podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And please become a Patreon subscriber if you see fit. We have a link in the description to our Patreon page where you can decide to become a member and a donor.
Peace.